Everybody, welcome back to the Audiomo podcast. This is episode number 15, and we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be sticking to electric guitars themselves. I did the Player Plus review. Dave hasn't seen it yet. First of all, Dave, how are you doing today? I forgot to ask.
Doing pretty good. Yeah, it was a little bit of a busy day. Just, we did, it was my brother's birthday, so we went over for dinner tonight, but then we were supposed to go over to my in-laws, and we did that for lunch, so it was a lot of running around, which is why I have not gotten to watch your player series video yet. I was definitely curious, because I know you've hinted at some feelings about them in the past, so give me the Cliff Notes.
Well, I have to start by saying the only reason that I went out of my way to say that you haven't watched it yet is because I know that this weekend you told me you also played a few of these. So I love the fact that we're going to be able to have a very uninformed of each other's opinions on the guitars at the same time. And that's kind of more exciting than if you had watched the video. So the one I had is just a Stratocaster, the single. And I have to say, there's a few things I actually really liked about it. It was really stable guitar as far as, because I restrung it myself because I wanted to measure the thickness of the neck, because none of that stuff's ever listed. And I feel like that's good data to give people. And it ended up being a lot weirder than I thought in that sense. It says it's a modern C neck, but it was 0.89 at the first fret, which is okay. That's kind of beefy-ish. But then 0.89 at the 12th fret, meaning it didn't taper. So it was almost like a shredder-ish kind of neck in that sense, where it wasn't a compound radius, but it stayed kind of the same thickness. So that kind of threw me off. But I mean, it was put together pretty decently. There was tons of flaking on the frets themselves, but that'll come off over time. I don't know. I thought it was pretty good, but $1,100. I think we're really smoking some crack at this point.
Yeah, I think that was kind of my overall vibe from it too. It was just like I picked up a couple of them, so let me just paint you a picture here first, right? So there's two Guitar Centers within reasonable drive from me. They're both about 35-40 minutes, and there's one in New London, and it's kind of a shittier. They've always had, they're better for used stuff because I think people just go drop shit there, but they have really not great inventory, right? And so we always used to go to the one in Manchester because it was by the mall and there was other stuff to do over there. And when we were kids and when I was in college, we used to go all the time. We just go hang out, it was a Guitar Center. It was kind of before, I guess maybe we were as jaded as we are now, but it was cool place to go. You get to play guitars and talk with people. It's weird. All the same people who used to work there are still working there, and they all look like they've been working at a Guitar Center for 10 years. But so I went in there, and the place is just stripped, man. There's nothing in there. Just they had one tiny wall of, reasonable Fenders and reasonable Gibsons, and I think two PRSs, but they're all locked up. You can't even take those off the wall without going to talk to somebody or whatever. Anything over $1,400 is a lock on it now, I guess. I don't know. They have their little tiny room of really nice stuff or whatever, where everything's in cases and everything, which, I don't even bother to go in there. But then they had the wall that usually has everything on it, and there's literally nothing there. There was I think there was a small row of Jacksons that were kids guitars, short scales and, or whatever. They had a couple of Gretches, which actually, side note, were pretty nice, for $300. I was pretty impressed. They were one of the few things I picked up that didn't just immediately suck right out the gate. They had a couple of Geo Ibanez's, obviously, just to, start the starter guitar kits and stuff. And then, they had just, of course, one giant string of Player Series, and that was basically it. That was there. They had a couple rows of Epiphones, and all of those were also awful. But yeah, I picked up a Tele, I picked up a Thin Line, and then I picked up a Strat, and they all just I don't know, they just felt cheap. And you're looking at the price tag on them, and I'm $900 for one of them, which was smashed in, by the way, that somebody had completely nailed all the electronics, and it was busted. It was discounted to $900, even though it was completely destroyed. And I don't know, like, especially the Tele in particular, like it had that super high gloss fretboard and then the, satin neck. And like, normally that would be a great thing, but for some reason it just felt like really badly done, and it just played bad. Like the fret ends were like kind of inconsistent, from guitar to guitar. Some of them were fine and some of them were not so great. And, I want to paint the Guitar Center picture because it may have not entirely been Fender's fault, right? Like this place is clearly a little bit in disarray, but yeah, everyone I picked up, I was like, there's no way I would pay $1,000 for this. Like they just were meh, and like some of it you can chalk up to bad setups and some of it you can chalk up to, I'm sure, kids beating the crap out of them and stuff. But there were other guitars that I did pick up there that were like I said, even the Gretsch, which is a $300 guitar, that was fine, and notably I picked up a Mitchell, which I never normally would have picked up, that played fantastically, and it was like $180 and had push pull knobs and it split and everything. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. But yeah, mostly junk.
I mean, that's about as blunt as we can get here, but I have to just have you clarify one thing. Were they all Player Series or were any of them Player Pluses?
They did have a couple of Players Plus. I didn't pick any of them because they were all Strats, which, it's not my thing. I was looking at Teles to really see if like, hey, if one of these is worth it. So I didn't play any of the Player Plus. And none of them really jumped out at me. They had all weird finishes and, so no, all Player Series, all felt cheap.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems I have. Even though the Japanese guitars from Fender also have poly on them, I don't feel like they cake it on to the excess that the Mexican factory does. I don't know why that is. One would think that you would use as little as possible on guitars that you're trying to mass produce just to save materials as far as the finishing materials. But I've had very similar experiences to the extent of feeling like it's just like it's almost intrusive when you're playing it. And yeah, in theory, with the satin finish on the neck, you're supposed to be like, oh, this is a great playing experience. But luckily on this specific one, it didn't have that problem. This Player Plus I had felt actually surprisingly really good. It's by far the best Mexican Fender that I've played. Probably out of the last like 5 or 6 is definitely better than all the Vinteras. I've had very bad luck with those. I have not found a Vintera that I've been like, oh, this is definitely worth the money, which has kind of painted the picture in my head of like sour grapes when it comes to these things. But I mean, with the Players in general, before even the Pluses, I played some of those too. To me, that's a $500 guitar. Like that's just. Yeah, that is what it is. I feel like that's what it's worth to me. Now, is it because obviously with the supply, the demand, and just inflation in general, other stuff we can't control here. I get that prices are going up, but I think so long as people keep buying these things up at these prices, what's the incentive for Fender to change? What's the incentive for Fender to do a better job or, just really have better quality control on any of these models? Doesn't matter if we're talking about an American Professional or a Player Strat or even a Squire. What's really the motivation?
Yeah, I don't really think they have any. And I mean, especially right now, to be honest, when we first started talking about these, a couple months ago at this point, I was surprised that you didn't like them too. And I hadn't really played them, which is kind of why I was like, hey, I'll stop in Guitar Center and go check them out. But like, I feel like I've been hearing decent feedback about them. I don't know that I've heard a lot of other people who are really unhappy with this particular series. And I think like, if I was looking at them on paper, I'd probably feel okay about them. Like I think the spec list is fine. And maybe that's enough. Yeah. I don't know. And I feel like the feel thing is hard. It's just hard to quantify too, right? Like, there's something like it's fantastic that they're giving you a satin backed neck with the poly front, right? Like that's great. But there's something about the way that it was done that just feels like, you play a guitar that does that the right way. And it's like, okay, the fretboard is covered for protection. And then the back is, transitioned for playability. And this just feels like somebody went on the top, like super fast with a shitload of finish, and then they forgot to do the back. And there's just something about the way that it felt that you can feel that about it, right? Like, but I can't put that on paper. So like, I don't know, maybe somebody else goes and they buy a Player Series and they're like, hey, it's just satin on the back. That's awesome, and they're fine with it. I don't know. Maybe we're too picky, but like I said, I'm not hearing bad feedback about them. So they definitely have no incentive to change,
Well, what I would counter that thing with, not necessarily counter you, but just like thinking about that, oh, that's a really nice touch. That's a really nice thing to have satin on the back of the neck. Those Sterlings are like $500. You can get a Mariposa new for $450. It's the same satin finish on the neck, has locking tuners on it, has a 2-point tremolo on it. Like, where is like the Fender like X amount more specced out than that? Both of them need a fret dress. That just goes without saying. You need to polish and really finish those frets off to get them the way that I prefer in a professional feel. So, I mean, if one is half the price of the other one at that point, and the specs are really similar, and they're both from bigger brands, because I would say, despite Ernie Ball not being as big as Fender, obviously, you're not talking about a brand like you mentioned, like Mitchell, where I forgot Mitchell even existed until you just brought them up in this podcast. Like, if you ask the average guitar player, they know who Ernie Ball is. So it's not like an unknown. Like, if you saw that guitar, like, maybe you'd want to play it. So I don't know. I just don't see the value. I just don't. And part of it might have to do with the fact that I do play so many Japanese guitars. And I'm thinking that they really are the ticket to go with. And I think with the next price increase from Fender, I will not be shocked if the American Professional 2 is $2,000. And the other thing that's scary, I talked about this very, very briefly in a podcast with you, maybe 3 or 4 of them ago. They discontinued the American Originals. Now, the American Originals are basically the new versions of the American Vintage, meaning they're going to have to do the Jaguar, the Jazzmaster, the Strat, and the Tele in vintage specs. Now those went up to $2,150 before this current price hike. They're out of production, so you can't order them new now. What are those going to be priced at brand new? I'm thinking they're going to be $2,500 guitars.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about. I mean, that feels like Gibson style pricing, right, where it just sort of seems unreasonable. But I also feel like in the same way with Gibson too, it's like, of course there are other guitars in this price range that, are better bang for the buck, or guitars less than this price range that are better bang for the buck. But the problem is getting the market who cares is going to go buy those things, and the market who doesn't care is just going to keep buying Fenders and Gibsons, right? It's like, it's what they want, and they go, this is what we have to pay for it, and then they just do. And I don't know that there's really any disrupting that at a certain point, unless you just completely flame the brand, which, like we've talked about before, I don't think Fender's doing enough wrong at any point to really do that, not in the way that I think maybe over time Gibson might do. But like, you talk about even the Player Series, right? At $1,000, like, I would argue even under the Fender brand, you have better versions of Fenders that are, like, go buy a Charvel. Like, a Charvel will do way better, in my opinion, in anything a Strat's going to do for that same price, right? But like, if I'm the type of person who would go buy a Charvel, I would just buy a Charvel, right? Like, they're not going after me. They're going after the guy who's like, I gotta have a Strat, and I don't care what the price is. And at the end of the day, if it comes in with decent specs, cool, I'm just going to buy it,
Well, here's the other thing that's really crazy. If you're remotely savvy at this point, and I think a lot of people are going to start hitting this point that wouldn't normally hit this point, you could build a better guitar with Fender parts for almost the same amount of money and have an infinitely better instrument. Like, you can get an American Professional 2 neck on Reverb for like $500, brand new. You buy that. Even if you buy like, say it's just a Vintera body, you know what I mean? On the Stratosphere, that's $300, $350, something like that, depending on if it comes with the hardware or not. Pick whatever pickups you want, and then you're almost at the exact same price. You're not getting a case with the Player or the Player Plus, anyways. You're getting a shit gig bag. So like, you're gonna get an American neck, a guitar that you assembled. You get the exact pickups you want. And you're at the same ballpark,
right? And all you need is a hand drill, right?
You also need a soldering iron.
Unless you get a pre-wired. Yeah.
Well, even pre-wired, you still have to solder them unless. Yes, but I mean, there are kits like the EMG make a kit that's solderless. But I mean, most people that play Fenders, we don't like EMG. We do not put EMGs in our guitars. We don't do that. It's very rare.
I think they sell EMG singles. I think you could do it.
They do sell them. David Gilmour had a set too, solderless. A funny thing, years ago, Best Buy made some kind of like major error, and they ended up refunding us for a computer that had like a bad recall and potentially was like going to go on fire or something. So we had all this extra money to kind of spend at bestbuy.com, and I was just like, I don't need anything from Best Buy. I went to the musical instruments section. I'm like, well, maybe I'll buy something with this credit and I'll resell it. I did get a set of those Gilmours. I never installed them. And they were like $200 with the pots and everything included. I was just like, yeah. But I was like, oh, it'll be easy to install. And then I just kept looking at the box, and it's just like, do I really want to go through this hassle just to confirm that I don't like these?
Yeah, I've done a couple of them, and I mean the solderless thing's really nice, to be honest. I will say, like it's cool to just be able to like pop it in and not have to worry about it.
It takes 5 minutes to solder. It takes 5 minutes.
It's not that hard, but I think it was because I was seeing this idea that I don't know if you've ever played a Relic, you know, the ones where you can like pop them open. You can pop in new pickups. Like what a cool idea that is. I think that's where EMG was trying to go. Was like, hey, if you want to just like swap out pickups, it doesn't take that long or whatever. I mean, they're way different than the Relics. I mean, those literally pop in and out. Like it's a neat idea for a studio guitar. But yeah, I don't hate EMGs. They're not my go-to by any means. Even in like the modern active world, I definitely would go with a Fluence over an EMG. But I see your point. Either way, yeah, very little is required to build a Strat. And I mean, I think the best part about it is like, unlike trying to build like a Les Paul or something, like you just screw in a neck on. They're pretty hard to mess up, you know?
You just hit my second point, and that's why I think part of the reason that you can somewhat more justify, if we're talking about an American original being $2,500, which I really think that's what it's going to be. A Les Paul standard is $26.99 or $27.99, but at the end of the day here, I could build the Strat. I can't build the Les Paul standard on my own. So, I don't know. I mean, like, that's just one of those things. It's a much more in-depth kind of process to assemble a set neck guitar, and the average person can't do that, as opposed to screwing in 4 bolts onto a new neck. You're all good to go as long as the neck cavity and the pocket fit each other. It's as brain dead as can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who gets into guitars immediately is like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to do a kit guitar. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I would be interested to see if like it's gone up in popularity as, you know, the ability to find information on how to do them has gone up. You know, I'm sure marginally it has, but yeah.
It went up tenfold. It went up so much that Warmouth was like, they're fine. And then they were like 8-9 months like delay times. MJT, the people who did my Telecaster body, same thing. Their wait time went from like, I think 8 to 10 weeks to months and months and months and months. It's just one of those things where everybody figured it out all at once, and everybody wanted to do something fun. And when you're all had the same opportunity, I'm going to be home for a while, why don't I build a guitar? Everyone did it, and it was way cheaper than, like we said, even before these price increases, than just buying, you know, a production guitar. And you had something that was really unique and something you could look at. And as somebody who's built quite a few partscasters, it's a proud moment when it's done and it's done right, and you play it and you're like, this is great. I really like that. Like that pink Jag. That's all parts, man, and it's a cool guitar.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I've done them from scratch, and I've done them parts, and it is super rewarding and super cool project to do. And definitely, if you're going for anything Tele or Strat style, it's super easy, which is cool. I don't think a set neck is beyond your ability. I would say I agree with you with the average person, but it's not as difficult as it seems like it is.
I know I could do it, but I mean, dude, I was just telling you before this started. I've had the dog damage guitars that were on stands. I have a toddler running around that has no consideration for anything. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to give it a shot, let me know. We'll walk you through it.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just gluing in the neck and then setting it and then just having it clamped down. I'm sure I could do it, but it's just like, as opposed to, it would take me 5 minutes to screw in a Fender style neck into a bolt-on body. But I mean, that is what it is. So wrapping that up on this topic here, I don't know. I think that $1,100 is batshit crazy for that guitar. I don't think it was a bad guitar. Here's the thing. Most people, I bet you included, thought that I was going to kill that guitar in the review. I didn't. I thought it was decent. I thought it was good for somebody who wants to go out and play live and not have to deal with any kind of like bad lighting and bad electrics in the venues themselves, because that's a big problem with single coil pickups. I'm a Fender guy. I know that. And it's very reliable, and it's kind of got like a modern twist to it. So it's like trying to appeal to younger people with the finishes, obviously, and the features. I can't see that guitar for $1,100 being for something that I would consider buying.
Agree. And I still feel like, so a while ago I was looking at one of those modern player tellies. It was one of those, it's
Chinese.
Yeah. And it's an SSH, I think. Yeah. And, I was looking at them for a little while because it just seemed like an interesting, kind of, at least for me, for a use case for a telly. And I finally got my hands on one of them, and it just played like crap, just absolute crap. But it really didn't, it was about the same level of crap as one of these player series that I played, which I'm being overly harsh. It wasn't that bad, but just like what you're saying, like, so I think the modern telly that I was looking at was like maybe $600 at the time or something, because they had discontinued them, or they were doing a clearance or whatever. I don't know, but like at $600 it was like reasonable. I was like, this doesn't play great, but like I could put some time into it and probably fix it up. And for the player series to play the same and then be $500 more, I'm like, yeah, it's just, it's just not worth it. And, I think that, I don't know, that those two guitars were very similar in my mind when I played them. But the Guitar Center trip was interesting, and it was interesting to see some of the other stuff that they had there. Like I said, the Mitchell was very surprising, and how well it played for a $180 guitar. And they had an Edwards there, which I thought was pretty weird. Somebody was selling it used. It was of course it's Guitar Center, so they had no information on the tag, but it was looked like a Les Paul custom style. Had like a mirror pick guard.
John Sykes.
It played, it played pretty good. I liked it. It wasn't my finish style. Otherwise, maybe I would have pulled it. But it was like $900, which didn't feel like it was that bad of a deal. And they had a Sire, the H7, which I thought was pretty interesting too. But I think they were just weird used guitars that just happened to come in. The Sire played okay. It was all right. It was a bad finish though. It didn't look great. But yeah, man, Guitar Centers are not what they used to be.
Well, it's been like that for quite some time. But before we're done with the Fenders, but I gotta ask you, because you went out of your way to say that you played a bunch of Epiphones. I want to know which Epiphones you played.
I don't even. They were so bad I stopped paying attention to them.
What was like the price ranges?
They were all in like the $400 to $500 range, and they really didn't have too much. They basically just ignored the SGs because, I'm not really interested in SGs unless they're real standout. And we've had this conversation. Yeah. But I picked up a couple of Les Pauls, and they were all super, super heavy, which it's like, even at the Epiphone level, I'm like, why are you guys doing this? Like, you don't need to. Like, this isn't, they're not, like, there's plenty of times where they're like, we're going to differ from Gibson in ways that we find important. Like, make the weight one of them. Like, I just don't understand. Anyway, I picked up a couple of Les Pauls, and they just all were super heavy, and some of the fret jobs were horrendous. Like, some of them I like went to go grab it off the rack, and I was like, okay, no, which is surprising, because again, I feel like the feedback and some of the reviews and stuff I've been hearing about the Epiphones, that people have been really happy with them lately. And again, I will give some credit to them, that maybe my Guitar Center is just letting real fucked up ones through. I don't know, but yeah, there was a few of them I literally I touched the neck and went nope. Like, that's how bad the fret jobs were. But yeah, it was just a couple of nondescript Les Pauls that were somewhere in the $400 $500 range, and they were fine. Like, they were not something I'd pay $500 for, but you know, they didn't make me go. Ugh.
Yeah, I went to a shop. Well, I used to go to a shop when I lived in San Diego, and at the time it was the full on inspired by Gibson, like the highest end Les Paul standard they have. I think it was a 59. It was like $850, $900, something like that. I remember playing that guitar and having the exact same thing. I was just like, this is okay. Like this isn't great. Like I don't even think this is as good as a tribute, if I'm being honest. But I mean, I thought that it was an improvement, to be honest, from some of the older Epiphones that I had played. But it still didn't feel like and it's the same. It goes back to the same thing with the player. It just didn't feel like a guitar that warranted that kind of money. It was just, it's living off the name on the headstock.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. This is exactly what I thought. I'm just, like, and especially at this point where there's so many other brands doing so many more interesting things, like, and especially at $400, like at $400, as much as we've talked about Harley Benton, like I can go get a Benton that's spec'd, like spec'd and like
smoke it. I did the video comparing the two of them. It wasn't close. The Harley Benton killed it. That SC552 absolutely rolled over on the Epiphone in every way. It felt better. It played nicer. It held tune better. It sounded better, even with those stock pickups, which I don't even love those stock pickups, but they sounded better than whatever the hell was in the Epiphone. And that was a nice Epiphone. That was one of the Korean ones that are really highly sought after. And it was like a toy compared to the Harley Benton, which there's not many times you're going to say that because the Harley Benton is such a lower priced guitar that there's not many that are, I don't know. It's a weird scenario, really.
Yeah. I think at this point, like for me, the only time I'm really considering one of them from the brands is like when I'm in one of those moods where I'm like, nope, it's gotta be that aesthetic, like, so you know what I mean too, like when you, especially with Benton, where it's like you see one of their Les Pauls and they just like look a little bit weird, and like you said, it's partially it's that curve, it's partially that like everybody's horn is like just a little bit different, to like avoid copyright claim or whatever. But like there are times where I'm like, no, I don't want an off-brand Les Paul. Like I want one that looks like a real fucking Les Paul. Like, but that's it. That's the only driving factor to make me think like I would buy an Epiphone or a Gibson at this point, because like that's it, it's whatever. And again, there are like other brands that do it better anyway, and then the specs on top of it are better. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like at $400, like you buy a Benton that's under $3 that smokes it, and it's like I just don't get it. I don't get where, but it's not for me. Clearly, right?
I think at the end of the day, that's the thing that we have to remember. And yeah, let's just leave that where it is. I think we've kind of beaten the horse to death here. However, we did just mention Harley Benton. I wanted to talk to you about that real quick. Harley Benton themselves have been commenting on videos. They commented on that video again about the DNA FX Pro, and the comment is gone again. However, somebody else in my comment section said they have updated the firmware so that the IR problem with the DNA FX Pro is apparently fixed.
Were they getting reports from other people, you think? I haven't even seen anything.
Well, they were the ones, apparently we were the first ones that really brought it to their attention. You were, rather. And so they kind of like, uh-oh. And I guess it's fixed one way or another. So if we contributed to that, that's pretty cool. If not, I mean, we still noted it, and they did comment on it right away. Like, we're looking, and then it's just like, it just cuts the comment off. Like, I wish I could show you guys, but it's only on mobile. When I go to my actual YouTube studio and click on comments, it doesn't show me anything. And it's really frustrating because I know that they're posting links, and I have links enabled. As long, it's just for whatever reason, they don't show up in my comments. So I got to email them and see what's going on, because whenever I try to talk to them on Instagram, I get very generic, like, thank you, hello, even though I'm like asking a question. I'm like, oh, so you're just you okay, you're no interest in actually talking. Cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's cool. And I mean, I did talk about that a little bit in the video, that a couple of my gripes are clearly like day one gripes, and that's fine. But I will say, from any kind of tech, regardless of whether it's, guitar tech, recording tech, phone tech, computer tech, I never, ever think it's a good idea to buy a product on the promise of something that's coming down the road, right? So the idea of you buying the DNA and then saying like, oh, well, they'll fix it in a firmware update, is a bad move. And I'm gonna take the laughing as maybe I've said something to the opposite.
No, you just reminded me of the quad cortex. Because there's so much there's so much with the quad cortex that's still not available that was promised on launch.
Yeah, right. And it's fine to say like, okay, that feature would be great to have, but like you have to be like, with what's available in the package right now, is it worth the price that I'm paying? And I think that's the only thing you can do before you buy any piece of tech like this. Is if the answer to that question is yes, fine, buy it. If the answer is no, but they're going to update it later, buy it later when they've updated it, because a lot of times this kind of shit just doesn't happen, and it's great that Harley Benton is addressing some of the issues, and I hope more companies can do that kind of thing. I really hope the Neural DSP can follow through on all the stuff that we thought the quad cortex was going to be capable of. Like, that'd be awesome. Like, if nothing, just from a consumer standpoint, it'd be great to have a product like that, but I don't know, they're dragging their feet on it, and who knows why.
Yeah, I guess there's one last thing I want to talk about, and you just reminded me of it, and inadvertently, and that is with Neural DSP. We haven't talked about them in quite some time, but I actually don't want to talk about the Quad Cortex. I want to talk about their plugins, and I want to talk about their strategy here, and see if maybe you can give me some insight on this. So, the most recent plugin they released was the Petrucci, right? Now, before that, what did you have? Tim Henson. Before that, Tobin Abasi. Before that, the only sore thumb that I'm going to name in this list, Corey Wong, because he's the only one that doesn't fit into this like kind of like very modernish kind of thing. When are they going to start kind of implementing different artists and different kind of styles? And it feels like a lot of the effects are copy pasted like directly into the same plugin. So it's like, wouldn't it almost be better then to offer like only like parts of it? Like maybe just like, oh, here's just the amp or here's this, instead of charging like the full retail price to get like the same kind of chorus, the same reverb, the same delay. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the innovation is kind of hitting that like wall, and they just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, they do. It's tough though, man. I feel like this gets into that weird, like, I think there's probably two paths. Well, there's more than two paths, but to me, the two obvious paths are do what they're doing, and they keep packaging it as like an artist thing, and it comes with, whatever the artist does. And in the case of the Petrucci thing, like that's like an all-in-one platform. That thing comes with so many features, it's ridiculous. Like, if you had known, if they had all come out at the same time, you'd only need to buy his, right? Because it covers most of the stuff that he's doing, and you got extra features. Whereas like, like the Henson's only got a couple of amps or whatever and a couple of pedals, and his has got all of them. Anyway, the other way to go would be to do what you're saying and just to like do a marketplace where it's like you can buy Petrucci's amps, and then you can buy a delay pedal, and you can buy whatever, and just do them in chunks. And like lots of companies do that, and like I don't use any of them, and I don't know if that's because of the format of the like the marketplace format and the pieces like that or whatever. I don't know if it's because the marketing style where they're saying like we could just package it all in one, but I think it's probably a combo of both. Like I think the reason that Neural's doing it the way that they're doing it is probably because their market research is really on point, right? Like I think the people who are spending the most amount of money on this kind of stuff are exactly the people who listen to those specific types of artists, right? Like the guys who listen to Animals as Leader will buy every single Neural DS plugin that comes out. Like, because they sound amazing, and because they hit that niche market of like, I just need different distortion tones, and I'm just going to like collect all of these and whatever. Those guys aren't necessarily as interested in going like one delay pedal over a bunch. Like they'll just keep buying them, and especially at the price point that they're at, where it's like they're only like $150 every time, like, and they do that every couple of months. Like you own a couple of them, I own a couple of them, my bass player owns like 3 or 4 of them or whatever. Like they would have gotten less money out of me if they just went like, hey, we just released a new amp and, same delay pedals or whatever. Like, I think it's the smarter way to go, even though it feels like at a certain point, like you're not getting more out of it. You know what I mean? But I don't know. If you only buy one, you're getting a ton out of it. If you buy a couple of them, you're not, which is weird to think about these as you're giving them more money. But I don't know. I don't like the marketplace style. And I've never liked that. And there's been a few companies that do it, and I just don't. I don't know. I don't use any of them. But I don't know. I don't know why.
Well, I can understand that. But let's go into the other point then. Because of what you're saying, the other suggestion I have becomes even stronger as to why aren't they doing this? Why don't they have a more diverse kind of palette of artists from different genres? I mean, you look at somebody like Josh Smith, for example, is really big right now. Somebody like Martin Miller, who somewhat endorses the brand, really big right now. Much different kinds of tones, not just Josh, much more so than Martin, but like you're talking about, like there's nothing like for a blues guy. There's nothing with any tremolo. There's nothing with like a legitimate spring reverb. You have a lot of the kind of okayest reverbs. You have the shimmer reverb and all that fun stuff, but if I was a company and I really wanted to have more people look at me, wouldn't it make more sense to just like not have 50 prog metal guys or rock or that kind of genre, and have like, you have like a handful, and then you have like, you diversify it, more people like Corey Wong that are, different in that sense, because then that's just going to broaden your audience and your potential customer base.
I think there's two reasons. I think one is the copy paste thing, right? Like they probably do less work for each one of them because they're all kind of in the same. Yeah, of course it is, but it means it's less work for them and more money because they don't have to do as much. But they still sell the same thing. And the second thing is historically the prog metal rock scene had the most buying power out of any genre, right? When it comes to physical goods or digital goods outside of the actual music, right? We spend the most on records, we spend the most on t-shirts, we spend the most on, merch in general. So I think, they're probably talking to those guys, and they probably tried it out with the Corey Wong, and they went, let's do something different. And when they don't make as much money as they do off that as they did with the Abasi, they go, okay, we're just going to do another prog metal one. And then, maybe they'll slowly do it. But I guarantee you the guys who are interested in the blues amps and the spring reverbs, there's nowhere near as many of them who are willing to buy a plug-in amp as there are, if like, they put out another Soldano.
Well, I would agree with you, except that a lot of those same people have no problem playing Fender Tone Masters now. That's a digital amp. That's a digital amp that weighs a third of the weight, or even a fourth almost, of a real tube amp. It sounds great. They will, if it sounds good enough and it can convince them, then they'll do it. I think that this stereotype of old people wanting to, I say that because I throw myself into this. And obviously, I've transitioned away from the plugins. Every demo I do now is from the Mesa and an SM57. I do it old school, baby. But I mean, I could still see myself using something like that. And like, for example, on the Quad Cortex, that Morgan amplifier, the Captain 50, was to die for. Well, put that in the damn plugin. I'll buy it. I will buy that for $100 with no other effects. Just that. I'll buy that. But that option's not there. And that's kind of where it's like, I'm not even saying necessarily a marketplace, but maybe just like more of like a vintage amp kind of like suite. Instead of, if you're not going to do an artist, maybe you throw the Morgan in or a Morgan style amp, and like a Fender that has a tremolo on it, like a Vox, like an AC30, something like that. Like just do a little bit more than kind of the same almost copy paste thing. And I know that it is easier for them to print money by just doing the same thing with very slight alterations, but in order to really, I know, and it's you're always going to find the worst in things, but it's true though. I mean, I understand it from that sport, and especially because they're trying to catch up because of the Quad Cortex. They're still so far behind on it. It makes sense, but I don't know. I feel like they're leaving food on the table, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is there for sure. And I would love to see them do it. But I feel like, again, the pessimistic attitude in me says that they probably don't sell as much on those kinds of things. And that's why they're doing it, right? Like they make more money off of an Abasi than they do off of Corey Wong. So like they just keep putting him in those spaces or whatever. And I think it just has a lot to do with, this type of crowd and like the fact that most of those guys, I'm not going to say most, but a lot of people who listen to that style of music do their own recording, and they do it with plugins, and they, are going out there and they're buying them over and over again. Like, it's the same thing with the Get Good stuff. Like I buy all of the Get Good stuff, even though I really only use the Modern and Massive, but it's just like, I just want to have them, because they work or whatever. So like, I'm the guy who's spending over and over on the same types of stuff, and I imagine a lot of people are doing that with the Neural DSP stuff. And yeah, it would definitely be cool if they had some other options, and they should be doing that. But I think it's the same stuff that, they're desperately trying to do what things are keeping them going, right? And I'm sure they're doing fine, but you know, like I'm sure there's also somebody in there going like, hey, we're not going to try a bunch of new stuff. Like this stuff's working, you know? So who knows? I would love to see them try some more adventurous things, and I will support them if they do. And let's hope we're enough, you know?
Before we finish this up, I want to just see something here. Did you Philip Mcknight me? As in, when you said, oh, well, the prog metal guys, we're the ones that spend the most on the merch. We're the ones that spend the most on this. Where? What source was this from, Dave? Because that seems like a very Phil Mcknight kind of thing to just throw out there, just so like matter of fact, casually.
Well, so I will say at least one of them was from the fact that Alter Bridge had sold the most like physical CDs out of any band, you know, in 1 year or whatever, right? And it just led me down this rabbit hole of, you know, like what types of genres sell the most merch.
I guess. Okay.
I'll find
You're gonna
them.
come back and you're gonna have some sources for this. Until then, you have McKnighted, and now that is a new term we're gonna use in this podcast. When one of us just talk out of our ass and just something that we don't know if it's a fact or not, we just. You know how I Met Your Mother? It was lawyered. You're just McKnighted.
All right.
You have McKnighted the stream.
I'm McKnighted. All right. Well, I'll openly say I do not have the source for it right now. But it feels like something that's true, doesn't it?
You're out of your mind. All right, Dave, you got anything else? I got to get going.
I do not.
All right. I'm sorry to end so abruptly, but I wanted to get that in at the end because I was like, wait a second. This is a perfect opportunity to start a new thing.
Yeah, you got me.
Yeah, it is what it is. Thank you guys for checking out this. We're going to have the album reviews pushed back a little bit this week. Things got a little busy, and yeah, I got a trip to Jupiter this week, which I'll talk to Dave a little bit more about. Just going to get the Jazzmaster on the Plek machine. Going to play some heritage guitars and have some fun. So that should be fun. You guys will have update videos throughout the week on that. We'll get to the album stuff when I get back. So thank you for listening, and I will see you all tomorrow. Take it easy, everybody.